she had grown up on the mountain. I had gone to the mountain probably since I was a week or two old. And so I was familiar with the landscape of that. The reason we moved there, it wasn't really a planned thing. We moved there because we didn't have any money and there was a fire and all our things were burned and the property already existed. My grandfather used it for spiritual retreats. And so he let his daughter and her children and her husband move up to this place so that we would have somewhere to live. And there was an old school mess hall built by the WPA. And so we moved into the mess hall. There was a big stone fireplace, so we weren't freezing to death. And we slept on army bunks. And my parents slept on the floor and we just were all in that one space together. So I was not shocked by the location. I was relieved that we had a place to be. We had been on the road for many, many weeks, months actually, and we were somewhere different every night. And so when we first got there, it wasn't scary at all. It was just, it felt like, oh, wow, this is going to be our new home. So that was initially a very beautiful thing. And it went into one of I think the coldest and snowiest winters on record, the first year we were there. So we were snowed in a lot and a lot of other things happened. But even that, I would say my first year before I got sick, all of that happened. I would say that there was something a little bit idyllic about having somewhere to be where there wasn't all the pressures of the community at the field, because we were raised in a really, really tight-knit collective that had really, really strict rules. And while my parents were very, very strict, they couldn't really keep track of us all the time, nor did they'd never really taken care of us anyway. We were raised by a community. And so we all of a sudden didn't really have supervision in the same way. And that part was, I think, very freeing, especially initially.
Right. That makes sense as a child who wants to explore. Can we talk a little bit about those rules that your grandfather implemented?
Yeah. So when my grandfather started his organization, which was probably in the late to 1920s, by 1931, I've uncovered many newspaper clippings. He called the organization initially Boys Christian League, and he took the boys on mountain trips before he acquired that particular property. So my understanding is that prior to that, he was a Boy Scout leader. And he didn't want to obey all the rules of what Boy Scouts required of him. So he took his Boy Scout troop, turned them into his own organization, and then started growing it from there. So for decades, it was an all-male organization. Nobody married there. No one had children there. It was a little bit more like Shakers in the sense that they believed since the end times were coming, you don't want to have children. You don't want to bring new life into the world. You are preparing to be in the army of God. It really was foundationally a very masculine male organization. My grandfather had 3 sons with my grandmother before he had my mom, who was his 4th child. And so before he had a daughter, I think he just thought God would bless him with sons and he would just continue to have this organization. And I think the reason he had children was probably because he really probably couldn't have gotten away with what he was doing socially if he didn't have a wife. That's my belief system. It's hard to know. He got married in the 1930s. He went on then to raise my mom as one of the boys until she got into her 20s. And then since the world hadn't ended, I think he had to make a choice. And I think especially my grandmother was like, we can't let her be a spinster, an old maid. She was called an old maid by other people. He didn't marry her off until she was 24, which was really old in the 60s. And so she got married in 1966. And then my sister was born a year after that. And then I was born after that. So I would just say that by the time we were born into the organization, we were the very first children born there. And there really was no system for what to do with children. And my parents were told by their understanding of God, which was probably my grandfather's words, that they should give up their children to the community. So by the time we were a week old, my mother handed us over. She certainly didn't breastfeed us or anything like that. She just said here, and we didn't have a single caregiver. We had whoever, usually 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, whoever, would just randomly, a lot of boys would pass us around. We were on camps and trips. And my older sister, who runs the school there now, she spoke at something and she was talking about how that next summer, she and I were really, really little. And she was talking about how it was a great thing that we were just sort of taken around the whole country, and it's all perspective, right? I certainly was raised itinerant as part of a community where my grandfather's rules were that boys and girls did not fraternize. And so I think because we were children, we weren't yet girls. Later, as we started getting older, there started being more and more strict rules. All the women were required to cut their hair short. there was a lot of shaming and blaming if boys were interested in the women who were around. And it just shifted the whole dynamic. And that's the dynamic I grew up in, is like, how do we keep these women quiet? Like, if we have to give some wives to the men because they married off the daughter, that means they got to marry off some of these other men. And then like, it just became, I think, a control fest for probably the next couple decades.
Something that really struck me, especially as a new mom, was that affection was a sin. Getting too close to someone was a sin. As a mom now, for you, looking back, how does that feel? Seeing that perspective from a healed place or even partially healed place, knowing the way that your mom and dad raised you, how does that make you feel?
Now, at this point, I feel very sorry for my parents. My mom's passed away. My dad's still alive. But just that they never had any sort of attachment to their children. And I mean, it was awful for us. But I think that my younger sister and I talked a lot when each of us had children. She had children much later than I did. But she said that she called me when she had the same reaction. She's like, how could mom do this? It's like, it wasn't until I had children myself. I just had children really young, that I just felt like, how is this possible? You know, like how wrenching though for my mom to have to do that too. Mm-hmm. And that part I'd never recognized of how horrible it must have been for her, because she thought she was doing the right thing. And I'm not condoning her behavior, but I'm saying that I really believe that she thought that we would go to hell if she didn't do what God required her to do, and she would go to hell. So when I had children, I breastfed for all of them over a year, didn't use bottles, did all the attachment parenting, all the opposite things. And my kids are doing great. 2 of my kids have kids now. So I am also watching that process and seeing them be in really strong relationships and taking parental leave and doing all the things to just really do. I mean, they're all very little babies right now, but like taking that time to really bond. And I just feel so grateful that that family cycle has been broken and that there's a lot of attachment. My 3 daughters all live in the same city that I live in. So they've all chosen, they're all partnered, married, and they live here. And so it makes me feel really grateful that, they didn't feel that they had to run away.
Yeah, you're breaking cycles. Yeah. You did break cycles, and that's huge. It's amazing that you were able to do that and become the parent that you truly wanted for your children intentionally without anything telling you what to do or how to behave. And yeah, there are a few scenes where in your book, you're just craving that love and affection from your mom. And we'll talk about you being in the hospital, but that's one of the moments where I thought, man, she just needs a hug. And she, your mom saying, oh, we don't do that. You're embarrassing me. Why are you doing this? And it's just heartbreaking because I'm sure you needed that love and affection. And then on the flip side, this is something that I found interesting as well. Women are Jezebel spirits, their temptations, be seen and not heard, that whole thing, be small, stay small, cover yourself head to toe. But then on the other side, she was like, well, if you're ever abducted, you need to love them and kiss them. And if you're kind to them, then maybe you can slip away. So I feel like that situation actually set you up for failure in the future because you're learning to never say no to men, to always be agreeable, to do whatever they say because you're just supposed to be meek and submissive. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that training, I think, was very harmful. And it has, I think, been really difficult for me to get that out of my system, even after so much healing. It's still difficult for me to know how to do boundaries. Actually, one of my daughters is a marriage and family therapist, and she works with trauma and she does all of that. And that's what she does for a profession. And I'll say to her sometimes, obviously I don't talk to her in a therapy context, but I'll just say she's really big on teaching boundaries. And I'll say, listen, I understand this concept, but I don't have any idea if my expectations are too high or if they're way too low. And I feel like I can't tell the difference even now,